Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry to Gar Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it!
Suns, Booker for the win. Yes!
Oliver, Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Rushed by George defensively. Booker waiting with it. He's way out on the perimeter now. Booker lobs it for Ayton. Ayton looks, goes over to Rubio. Rubio on the drive. Waits, shoots. The shot is not good. Rebound Zubats. He loses it. Suns get it back to Rubio. Time. 6 seconds left in the game. Out to Booker. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Booker on the drive. Goes up. Here's the shot. Shoot! Booker! And the Suns win the game. Devin Booker at the buzzer puts it up and puts it in. Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCullough, and I am joined, as always, less regular now, but still as always, by my good friend and co-host, David Nash. David, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Max. It's always good to be back on the mics, and this team keeps coming up with ways to drag us back to the old podcast. So I'm really excited to jump into this one. It's obviously been a pretty crazy start to the season, but how are you going?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I mean, I think we can make a guarantee to the listeners that we're going to come on after any 18-game win streaks happen. We keep saying this thing, like, because they keep doing amazing things. Like, yeah, they go to the finals to be on every time. Like, they just keep doing things like that to bring us back.
They really do. They really do. It's a stark contrast, as we always say, to when we first started the pod, and we're actually doing it on a weekly basis with much less interesting things to talk about. But yeah, as long as they keep playing this kind of basketball, I'm sure we'll keep coming back semi-regularly, Max.
Yeah, I believe we podcasted every week through a season where they won 19 games. And they have 19 wins right now, David. It is December 5th.
Amazing.
So, yeah, we're just going to break down the first quarter of the season. Obviously, a lot of good to break down, including the 18-game win streak will be fun to talk about. We want to talk a little bit about Golden State and Phoenix, because that is now emerging into maybe the NBA's best rivalry.
Yep.
And we're going to do this all in sort of a big question style thing, where you and I are just going to ask each other kind of the things we're thinking about. A little preview, David. Mine are a little more negative than I was expecting them to be.
Oh, okay.
It's hard to be negative about this team, but there's a couple nits I want to pick with you. It should be fun.
All right, let's get into it then, shall we?
Yeah. We'll start with a recap, as always.
All right. Well, Max, the last time we spoke was late August, I believe. So since then, quite a bit has happened in Suns world. The Phoenix Suns, as you said, are now 19-4 at the time of us recording, and currently share first place in not only the division, conference, but also the entire NBA with the Golden State Warriors. I'm not going to recap all the games so far, so instead I'll ask you and the listeners to think of this question. I'll throw you right off the top.
Yep.
Can you name our 4 losses, Max?
Denver, Portland, Sacramento, Golden State.
Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. I have struggled. I had to look at the record, to be honest, so you did a lot better than I did. Hopefully the listeners did too. From a health perspective, obviously a little bit going on there. Devin Booker currently out with the hamstring soreness, I believe they're calling it. And then we've got a bunch of knees. We've got Nader with knee injury management, I believe. Dario Saric with the knee ACL recovery. And Frank Kaminsky not having surgery or anything, but has knee stress fractures, I believe they class that as. And obviously Mikal Bridges with the dislocated finger in the last Warriors game. But just looking at our good friend Callan Olsen reporting on that before we jumped on the mics, Bridges is adamant that he hasn't missed a game so far and he doesn't plan on doing so anytime soon. So I don't think we'll see him on the injury report going forward. But
Love it.
We're going to talk about a lot of everything that's gone on shortly, but what's the number one standout memory so far, Max? I always love to throw you one of these when we do the recap.
Yeah, this is going to be a really weird one. On Twitter, I was praising this particular performance. It was a close win over the Minnesota Timberwolves, which at the time looked kind of bad, but now Minnesota's playing pretty well, so it looks a little better.
Yep.
But we should have lost that game. There's no way we should have been in that game. It was second night of back-to-back after we beat Houston. And in the third quarter, we just couldn't make a shot. But Devin Booker wouldn't let us lose. He just wouldn't. He was just unbelievably good, particularly in that third quarter, at keeping us in it. And to me, that's when I noticed, like, oh, wait, this team might actually have a hefty win streak here. Because if they're carrying that much about that particular game, particularly Booker, that was something.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one a lot. And yeah, pretty reminiscent of, I guess, a few of those early wins early on in the streak. Like, it's hard to, remember now, but we probably shouldn't have been on this longer streak given some of the rough games that they played early on, but that's a sign of a good team. They kind of just gutted them out, a few of those, and Minnesota was definitely one of those for sure.
Yeah, it's a sign you have Chris Paul on your team when you get out regular season wins like that.
Exactly.
Just unbelievable how he's the best player in the clutch every single year.
I love it, and I'm sure we will get into him a fair bit throughout this episode, but should we talk about those Warriors games? What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. So, obviously, the first one we won. Booker went out in the first half, which was unfortunate, but you got to like the way they responded in the second half. Maybe we can focus on that, because I think the most interesting, probably the most fun part of this of the two games for Suns fans was the second half of the first game. Mm-hmm. Because I know you broke this down, and I'll hand it to you to talk about, but just the defensive effort from the Suns in that half was unbelievable.
Yeah, and I kind of focused on Mikal, but really, I guess as I delved into it and was sharing the clips, it really was a whole team effort, which you kind of have to. Not one guy stops a guy like Stephen Curry, particularly the way the Warriors play with him, cutting a lot off ball. He's not that... I guess that's what makes him so fun to watch and so special to watch. He's not that James Harden, Luka Doncic, LeBron James, even that kind of heliocentric, I'm going to dominate the ball kind of player. He probably could be, but the Warriors make him even more dangerous on this current team and some of those old Warriors teams by playing him a lot off ball, which makes it just really hard. And it is such a team effort to guard a guy like that. So, yeah, I think that was probably the story of that first game. It's certainly what all the, national media and everyone was talking about. I think, what was it? It was Curry's worst ever shooting performance if he took 20 shots or more, or one of those arbitrary cutoffs that they like to run with. But it was, that was pretty unique and special to mention. But I think for me, it was more, I guess, that reaction after Booker went out. I'm certainly not the first person to note it. I think they may have even touched on it in the second game during the telecast. But for the Suns not to, have a lull or kind of go, oh crap, Booker's out, we're done. And they really just fought back. And again, that's the guy you just mentioned before. Like, Chris Paul-led teams aren't just going to, have Booker go out and drop their head and lose the rest of the game. They're going to fight for it. And some guys stepped up, which was really interesting to see. But Mikal was definitely the story. 2 points, 2 rebounds, I think 3 assists, 4 steals and a block. But just had his fingerprints all over this game, even though it was a 2-point effort for him offensively.
Yeah, he just totally mucked up the Warriors' offense in the fourth quarter. They really just couldn't get anything going, and he was. I think Ayton was also very good. Chris Paul was very good defensively in that game, but Mikal was just all over the place. He was like kind of like a free safety back there. That analogy gets used all the time, but he actually was doing that, and he was. I know all the Warriors fans on Twitter wanted to say it was just a bad shooting night from Steph, and to some extent they're right. So to some extent, he missed shots that he could make.
Yep.
But also, I don't know how you can watch that fourth quarter and not be like, oh, wow, Mikal had Curry in all sorts of discomfort. He did not feel like he was not getting to his normal spots. He had to take a couple shots he didn't want to take. You could tell a lot of it was because the shot clock was getting run down because they just couldn't find anything they wanted to find. And that's how you beat the Warriors, right? The Warriors are a turnover-prone team because they're pass-happy.
Yep.
And if you can really just get, kind of break that up a little bit and not let them get into their flow, it's going to be really hard for them to score. Because it's just going to come down to Steph having to take crazy shots and trying to make them, which he can do sometimes, but that night it didn't fall for him.
Yeah, defense, it's such a poorly discussed part of the game online and even in the commentary box sometimes, the broadcast booth, I should say. But it isn't just about whether there's a hand in a guy's face, as you said, and I've got some stats that we'll bring up later on, which I think really speaks to this, particularly with Mikal. And, defense is played a lot off the ball, making a guy like Curry really work for the first 15 seconds of the shot clock. So then when he does take that shot, it's not the ideal shot that he wants to take, and he's really had to work for it, which, as you say, over the course of a game, fourth quarter, crunch time, if you're really feeling it in your legs because you've been made to work all game, that's when you do start to fall short on some of your jump shots, or you do start to make some mental errors as well. A guy's a little bit in your head, even though he might not be, right in your face. This time around, you're thinking about the last time that he curled around a screen and kind of got a hand up there. So, that part of defense, I think, is very under-discussed, and I think it's probably, again, something we'll discuss a bit later, but a reason that a guy like Mikal Bridges can go underrated for so long, and I'm just glad that he's finally getting the credit that he deserves on that end. I think one thing in particular for this game specifically, and I think that's really important going forward when we particularly do play the Warriors, hopefully in a playoff series, because that would be really, really fun to watch 7 games of that, even though it might be very, very stressful. Mm-hmm. I've said it before with Ayton and Bridges. I think they're one of the best, if not the best, pick and roll duo in the league from a defensive standpoint. And the Draymond-Steph pick and roll is one of the absolute worst you can come up against in the NBA in terms of trying to defend, because they can both pass, they know each other's games inside out. And the one play that really stood out to me from that first game was late in the game. They did the inverted pick and roll where Draymond is essentially the point guard and Steph is the screener. And so many teams really struggle with how to defend that. And Mikal and Ayton they didn't miss a beat. They just switched it. Mikal came over and blocked Curry's shot on the help defense. And that one for me was just kind of like, all right, not only are they shutting down when Steph's on the ball, but, the Warriors, that's kind of their plan B when it comes to how they'll beat you offensively. And the Suns showed that they could still defend that too. So that was probably the moment of the game for me in the first one at least.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. That pick and roll was unstoppable for almost anybody. And that's what... So, Steph Curry is obviously, top 10 offensive player of all time, probably top 5 offensive player of all time. You're not going to totally stop him all the time.
Yep.
But what you can do, though, and it's particularly important to do against Golden State, is, stop the avalanche.
Yes.
Right? And that's when the Golden State gets terrifying, is when they get on a roll, when it's not just Curry, but it's everybody around him. Curry's hitting the threes, but he's also, because he's hitting everything, he has the whole defense bent, and, everyone's scrambling, and the Warriors getting wide open threes from other guys all over the place. That's what you got to avoid, and I think the Suns showed... in that second half particularly, but they showed it a couple times, I think, in these 2 games, that they can stem that tide a little bit. They're the team that can junk that up. And Curry might have a legendary shooting performance. You can't stop that. All you can do is make sure you're sound on the rest of it. And we've been harping on it already a lot. The fact that they're making the Warriors work, the Warriors are going late in the shot clock. That's how you avoid those third quarters in Oracle or whatever it's called now, where they go on a 20-4 run and you're buried.
Is it Chase Center?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Chase. Okay, yeah, Chase Center. So it doesn't sound as cool.
No, it doesn't. Oracle is a much better name. But that's probably a good segue, I suppose, to the second game. Before we do, you mentioned Chris Paul on defense before. I think he's getting a little bit more targeted this season, and the Suns are definitely trying to hide him a little bit more even than last season. Mm-hmm. But he's kind of taking it personal too. He's such a prick, and he's so proud as a player that if he notices that teams are trying to target him, he really gets into them, on the block if guys are trying to back him down and stuff. And he had 8 deflections in that first Warriors game, which, wow. Again, as a team, him helping at the nail there, deflecting the ball away, kind of shading over to Curry to kind of send 2 to him on the ball. He's just such a smart defender, even at 36 when he can't quite move as freely and easily as he did earlier in his career. I still trust him, and I kind of like seeing when teams are, trying to target him with a bigger guy when they're hiding him on the block and stuff, because I'll take Chris, every day of the week in those matchups. He always finds a way to get a deflection or poke a ball loose. So that was just another thing from the first game. But you mentioned the avalanche, and I guess there was a couple of mini avalanches in that second game, which meant that we went down 96 to 118 in that second one. Was there anything? I mean, it's a hard game, obviously, to break down with Booker and then Mikal's injury as well, which I really do think sucked the life out of him a little bit. He almost, a bit of a contrast to the Booker injury. We kind of didn't miss a beat when Booker went down, but it almost felt like because of Mikal's crucial role on Steph, when he went to the locker room, it kind of really changed, and Monty was really kind of trying to pull reins to get the right rotation going, and it just wasn't working, Max.
You know, it was more of a straw breaks the camel's back kind of situation. We were on the second night of it back-to-back.
True.
We had just beaten Detroit in a game where we had to try. We had to play the whole game. We had beaten the Warriors earlier in a huge national TV game at home, so the emotional spot was just better for the Warriors. They wanted the game more.
Yeah.
Like you said, when Mikal went out, the energy got sucked out. Even though he came back, like that was definitely a hit. Like I just, there's not a lot of stock for me to put in that game. Honestly, I don't care that much.
No.
I expected to lose that game, and we had won 18 games before that, so you can't win every game, David. Unfortunately, I wish we could win every single game. But yeah, coming away from that, I just think it's a nice reminder. I think that we're not just clearly better than the Warriors. I don't think.
No.
I don't think either of these teams is clearly better than the other team. We'll see if Prime Clay's back all of a sudden,
Yep.
which I have some major skepticism about. Maybe they'll be better than us. But right now I'm expecting this just kind of be a wire to wire kind of a showdown between two rivals, and I'm actually really excited about it. I tweeted about it last night. I basically said that I hope both these teams are good for the next couple of years because this is like a really fun rivalry. I think we haven't had one of these since maybe the Spurs, a little bit of the Lakers in the 2000s.
Yep.
I feel like we finally have a real rival again. It's just fun.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's like thinking about the playoffs last year. It was either teams that I actually quite liked, and going up against, or that I just really had no interest in. Like I didn't consider the Lakers to be a rivalry. Like obviously it was scary going up against LeBron James and AD in the first round, but I really felt, injuries aside, that we could kind of have their number, and they, I guess, there's that cocky clip of the, Andre Drummond, mimicking LeBron.
Yeah.
There wasn't elements to that made me think of it as a rivalry as much as I wanted to beat them. And then, Denver really shorthanded, but I really like their team overall. So it's not really a rivalry I can get into. Similarly with the Clippers. And then the Bucks, like we said it, like if we were going to lose the finals to anyone, we've both talked at length about how much we love Giannis. So that didn't really feel like a rivalry where, I really respect the Warriors. I loved watching them on their run, but there is that genuine part of me that dislikes them and kind of feeds into that rivalry. And I feel like, as you said, that no team is much better than the other, which could mean great things for a really competitive rivalry down the stretch here and hopefully into the playoffs. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't think there's too much to take away other than the Mikal injury from that second game. Maybe a little bit of stuff we saw, particularly with Book not playing. The Warriors were really, really aggressive on Chris Paul, kind of like we saw in the playoffs and the finals, and some teams have some success with. But again, hard to take too much from that because he didn't have Booker as the release valve. Maybe it was good that some other guys got some reps, kind of taking the ball up or being that release valve. I think we saw some interesting stuff maybe with Landry, kind of taking on a little bit of playmaking there as the starting shooting guard. But you're right. It's really hard to take much from that game, particularly after Mikal's injury. So
that's really a perfect segue into my first big question.
Let's do it.
So maybe we should
Let's
go there.
do it.
But real quick though, I do want to before we get to it, I do want to say this is the stoicism that I study in me. Just every Suns fan should just not take for granted the fact that Mikal did not get seriously injured because oh my God, for about I don't know how long was that, 30 minutes to 45 minutes there, it was dark. It was dark, man.
Yeah. It was,
and it's not the case. We dodged that bullet, so we should all be very happy that this season's still alive.
I think his reaction too, I didn't help.
Yes.
I was watching it on replay and already knew the diagnosis, but I can't imagine if I was watching it live when you saw him walking down the tunnel. He was so dejected. It was almost like he expected the worst. I said again, reading Kellen's timeline earlier, it sounds like they had to get it X-rayed for any breaks before they popped it back in. So he was probably thinking, I've broken a finger here and it's going to need surgery or something, particularly on the shooting hand. Not ideal at all. But absolute best case scenario, which the Suns keep getting a little bit of luck in that field, which, you've got to take it while you can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, so my first big question is, where does the offense come from without Devin Booker on the floor?
Yep.
So I looked at the top per 36 scorers on our team right now. So Booker's 26, Second is JaVale at a robust 22.9. Very robust. Then Campaign, 19.4, 8 and 19.3. Drops off to CP3, 15.9. Then drops down to Cam Johnson and Landry about tied in the low 14s. And then Mikal and Jay down even lower.
Yep.
So I guess my point is, like, they don't have an obvious second scorer, really. Campaign's only shooting 31.7% from three this season. Pretty low true shooting. He needs to get that going a little bit. Shaman's shooting well from three, but he hasn't really gotten the assists where I was hoping he'd have them. Really, the playmaking's been okay, not great. His field goal attempts and three-point attempts are the same as last season, like exactly, for 36. So, of course, it's somewhat a temporary problem because Booker is going to come back. We don't know exactly when, but he will come back.
Yep.
But I guess that's the question for you: is how big of a problem do you see this being? Like, if Booker comes back, is it going to be fine, or is there an issue here?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess you could look at it from two ways. First is like, how long is Booker going to be out? We're probably looking at the next 4 or 5 games conservatively. I would have thought.
Yeah.
Particularly because they're saying it's just soreness and not a tear or anything like that. But he does have a bit of a history now, so they would want to be careful with that so it doesn't repeat itself throughout the season. But I guess first thing, that's why it was so important that they went on this streak, because it gives them a little bit of flexibility to drop a game here or there, try a few things here or there. And I guess the lens that I would look at it from is, we're going to find out, and someone's going to get the shots, or different people are going to get the shots in different games. We're going to find out who is potentially able to take on that burden. I think Chris obviously has it in him. We've seen time and time again, he'd kind of prefer not to, particularly early in games. He'd like other guys to kind of step up, and then if he really needs to, he'll close out the game and take more shots. So I'm really interested to see what happens. I do think that, it's been trending that DeAndre is kind of, wanting to take on a little bit more, but he's still a bit limited offensively in what they can do. I think Mikal, after an aggressive start, has kind of plateaued off a little bit. I've got something a little bit later for us to talk about in terms of, I guess, some of the reserves taking more shots. But how about we talk about your guy Landry? He's been given, at least for this last game, that Book's starting shooting spot. What do you think as a Landry optimist? What can he do in terms of juicing the offense a little bit more while Devin Booker's out?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the thing with Landry Shamet, first of all, it's insane how the Suns shooter expects him to make every single shot. He's not going to make every shot.
Yes.
He's shooting like near 41% right now from three. He's fine in that department.
Correct.
Really, what I'm I guess. And also, I would say, defend him before I actually give him a little criticism. His defense has been much better than expected. He's been totally fine on that end.
100%.
I think the biggest issue with him right now is he just still doesn't seem ultra comfortable being a playmaker.
Yep.
A lot of times he'll drive like under the rim. He'll actually get by people and get to good spots, but he's not comfortable finishing. He's not comfortable scoring in the mid range, and he'll oftentimes just like sort of decide to just kind of back out of it and throw it to Chris Paul or Devin Booker and just not make a mistake.
Yep.
I think he needs to be less concerned about making mistakes, I guess is what I would say. I think he's really worried about turnovers when sometimes you have to take risks to make plays, right?
Correct.
So I think I'm sure they're in his ear about that. I know the kind of coach that Monty is and the kind of team they are. I'm sure they're telling him, "Hey, Landry, we don't care if you make mistakes. Just we need your secondary, tertiary playmaking." But I guess that would be where I see him at right now. How about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty similar. I mean, I'm like you. I think I've not purposefully, but I've found myself in situations online, defending Landry, because there does seem to be, I posed the question the other day. I can't think of a recent ex-Suns role player who was scrutinized the way Landry has been so far through 20 games this season, and particularly not one who is doing his job of putting the ball in the basket from beyond the 3-point line, which is exactly why you bring a guy like Landry in. Someone did point out, it was probably the trade and then Ayton not getting extended and he did, and there just seems to be a little bit of, I guess, negativity towards like, what's this guy done? And had everything given to him.
Well, especially with the initial number being so high seeming, and then it ended up being fine, yeah.
Yes, and I've tried to point out that the contract is actually very, very good for where the Suns currently sit, but yeah, I think that does get overblown a little bit too. I was looking before at Landry in particular. He's 92nd percentile at the moment off screens. He's 86th percentile off handoffs, and he's 93rd percentile as the ball handler in the pick and roll. That's very small sample size, that last one at least. But he's kind of, on top of doing his job of hitting open threes, he's actually doing all those things that we talked about him being as a really, versatile shooter and scorer. I agree with you. He's almost surprising himself with when he's getting to the rim and finding himself, stuck underneath it sometimes. And that's kind of affected how well he's been finishing or dishing off from there. But I love your point about Monty. I don't think it just applies to Landry either. I think particularly while Booker's out, him and Chris need to encourage these guys a little bit more to potentially make mistakes, because I'm trying to see the, opportunistic view of Booker's injury here and the, the overall point that you're bringing up. If they can find one or two guys to step up a little bit in Booker's absence, that's going to mean amazing things at the pointy end of the season when, like I said before, Chris is getting overplayed defensively. Booker's being shut down by a really good stopper. We're going to need a third or fourth guy to be able to step up. And, at the moment, even though we'll get into DeAndre and Mikal, I'm sure, in a bit and what they can do, I really like Landry. I think what I'm seeing from him, even though it's not all kind of going down for him right now, I think you compare him to the guys that he's replaced in, Javon Carter, Langston Galloway, and then even to a certain degree guys like Cam Johnson that are in the Suns lineup already. His willingness to attack closeouts, be aggressive, put the ball on the floor, move it around, you can kind of at least see in theory why they wanted a player like him.
Yes.
It's not all working to practice right now, but it is only 20 games. He's the new guy. This system kind of runs itself, and he's trying to plug himself in, and brings a different skill set too. As I said, they haven't really had a guy who runs around off screens, shoots off handoff. So they've slowly had to try and bring in ways, and they've found a few little cheeky ways with Chris Paul's little behind the back kind of dump off passes as he comes off the corner, and a few little things like that. But I think they're still feeling it out, and I think without Booker's presence, now is a really great time where they could potentially feel that out some more with Landry in the starting lineup and kind of learn to play a little bit of a different way when he's on the court.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think a big difference between Landry and like you mentioned, the guys he sort of replaced is the handle is really good.
Yes.
He doesn't turn the ball over that way very much, which is nice to have out there. So the thing that I guess, again, I kind of have some weird downers here, given that we're 19-4. But I guess the thing that I'm most disappointed in is I haven't loved the way the campaign Landry Shamet backcourt has looked.
Agreed.
They don't do it a ton. They usually have one of Booker or Paul out there, but I think they're just better with one of those guys out there. And I don't totally blame either guy for it. I think Campaign is sort of not looking for Landry that much. And Campaign's his efficiency is just down this season. He's just not playing as well. I'm not too worried about it because I think he looks. The eye test is okay with Campaign right now. I think he's just missing a lot of shots. But you'd like to see the chemistry between those two guys get better. You'd like to see Campaign looking to set Landry up. You're not seeing a lot of that. You see more. Both guys are looking more for JaVale, which has been good. And JaVale's been really good this season. And that's been nice. I think there's been some good chemistry between kind of everybody and JaVale. But I'd like to see those two guys play a little better together.
Yeah, it's funny we're getting very nitpicky here early on in what's a streak episode. Hopefully the listeners stay on. I promise you guys there's some positivity coming down the line. But yeah, I think from Campaign's point of view, jumping to him, I think we're starting to see a little bit that he's not a true point guard.
Right.
And that's why he's suited so much to this 6-man role. He's a energizer bunny off the bench, takes a lot of shots, as you said, not making as many this season as he was last season. But I agree with you. I think the eye test on that is still pretty good. I think he's just missed shots in bunches. The second Warriors game, perfect example. I think he took 17 shots and only made 3.
Yeah.
But when you actually watch the game, he had, I think, 3 or 4 attempted putbacks off his own misses, which, adds as another missed shot, and it kind of makes it look a hell of a lot worse than what it was, and he was just pressing a little bit too much. But, as a point guard in the two-man game, as you said, like with a big like JaVale, he's great. He can find the big when they're overplaying him, but setting up other guys, and that's the perfect example, like his backcourt partner, like he's supposed to as a point guard. You look at Chris Paul and Devin. Chris can get his own, but he knows how to set up Devin as well. Payne doesn't really have that in his repertoire at the moment. He's not that kind of true point guard, and that's maybe where they're both clashing a little bit because, they're not working together as so much as they're both almost trying to provide the same thing, and that's probably going to be down to Monty making sure that they are out there with the right guys. So I'd probably like to see Landry maybe a little bit more with Chris, and when Devin's back, maybe you play him a little bit more with Campaign, and Campaign can kind of play off the ball, and that speaks to, I think, what we spoke about in the off-season in terms of wanting Booker to get as many on-ball reps as possible as well. So maybe that's the way they go with it going forward. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a hard one. Because I also actually like a lot the mix with Shamet and Booker together. I think is fun.
Yep.
Offensively, particularly because they're both very willing shooters, obviously. So I think that's a super dangerous offensive lineup. I don't know. It's interesting. I think my ultimate conclusion on this is that I'm not worried really at all. It's just kind of interesting to follow and see how it goes.
For sure.
I mean, obviously, I'd be worried if Booker were out for like months. That would be an issue. But I'm hopefully he gets back here in the next couple of weeks. I actually looked up. So he had a similar injury. I don't know if you remember against the Raptors like 4 years ago or something like that. He was out. So basically, today it's 12/5, December 5th. That's when he got hurt. Mm-hmm. He came back like December 22nd. So if he's on that same kind of trajectory, we should just expect him back in a couple of weeks. I think that's probably about right.
Yeah, I'm always really bad with these because, hamstrings in particular in the other sport that I follow here in Australia, Australian rules football, they're really, really conservative. Like guys miss, 4 or 5 weeks most of the time. A different sport, a little bit more endurance based, so they're worried about hamstring injuries specifically. But I can tell you that pretty much every time Booker has had a hamstring, I've been shocked at when he's returned in terms of when I expected him to. So I think they'll be conservative, but I still think it'll be pretty soon and that we'll see him back on the court.
Let's hope so. All right, David, that was my first question. How about we turn to your first question?
Yeah, I want to talk about DeAndre. It kind of is a nice little segue off your point here in terms of like what's going to happen to the offense, because I think there has been some signs, and I guess my big question is it too early to not fall into the trap again with DeAndre? I think we've done it a few times over the first 4 years of his career where he plays one of these mini stretches where things just look a little bit different and you kind of go, oh, has it clicked? And then all of a sudden there's another 15 games where he's back to being, serviceable, but not that kind of takeover player that you see him in little stretches. So if you look at his stats pre that little knee injury, it was 6 games that he played. He was only scoring 14.2 points, only taking 10.8 shots and only playing 29.1 minutes per game. Since he's come back from that injury, there's been 11 games. He's now scoring 17.7 points per game in those games. He's taking almost 2 more shots at 12.5, and he's playing 31.5 minutes per game, which is still very low for a guy of his age and ability. So I'm sure that'll keep trending up as well. But as I said, I've fallen for this kind of a couple of times, so I'm a little bit wary and definitely don't want to go in too soon. But I'm just seeing a few things, and I think everyone is seeing a few things in these last few games, particularly that Warriors game, and there was another one just before that I can't quite remember who we played, where he's just, really running the floor, sealing his guy way better than he basically has ever in his career, being really aggressive on the offensive boards, which, as we've always talked about on this podcast, that's always like a real early signal in a game. If he's attacking the offensive glass, he's on for the night. Just the way he's kind of rolling, going back to those Golden State Warriors games, he was ducking into the paint when they were trying to double team him with 2 little guys on the weak side, and him and Chris kind of worked out the timing perfectly for him to just duck in behind the defense and finish. And just seems to be playing really free and really confident at the moment. And I wondered whether you're seeing that too, and whether it is maybe an indication that he's willing to step up on the offensive end.
Yeah, it's a good question. My next question is going to have him involved in it, so I'll do his part of it now.
Okay.
It's sort of weird because I would have said that I thought he was playing very well this season, better than last season. More of a continuation of what he was like in the playoffs than he was last season.
Yep.
It's not totally reflected in the stats yet.
No.
He's scoring a little bit more.
Yeah.
The efficiency is actually down. Rebounding is up a bit. Blocks are the lowest they've ever been in his life. And I think we can just throw blocks out entirely for him. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
So I've been happy with him. I think he's much more consistently in the game now than he was last year. It feels like to me. Mm-hmm. I think especially I love the way he came out against the Warriors in the first game. I think that's a matchup he has to exploit, and he exploited it. And I think the fact that he sees that now, the fact that he's this big in those matchups is just really, really important. Because I guess I would say on the other hand, he wasn't like that against the Nets as much. JaVale was actually playing better than him against the Nets.
Yep.
So yeah, there's still a little bit of that with DeAndre. I don't know. It's weird. It's sort of like it's hard for me to even come to a conclusion here. I have a lot of mixed thoughts on it. I think overall though, I'm encouraged. I feel a lot better about some of the shot selection stuff too. He's not taking quite as many annoying jump shots. Really, he only takes them now when like he kind of has to, like they're wide open or the shot clock's running down.
Yep.
He's getting better with that, but I don't know. What do you think?
I think on that, the thing that really changes for me, it's not a make or miss thing. You know, he makes some sometimes where I still hate the shot, and he misses some where I love the shot. And I think the biggest thing, and Mike and Sam at the Timeline podcast have been touching on this a little bit recently too, it's the work he's doing before the catch that makes me so much more comfortable with the shot that he ends up taking sometimes. Like he's getting 2 feet in the paint. He's pushing his defender back. It's not that like he's getting the ball at the top of the elbow, the defender's already sagged off him, and he's just taking a wide open jumper with no rhythm at all. Like he's really making the defense bend before he's kind of taking the shot, and he's made some great passes through doing that as well. You know, when you work before the catch and make the defense move to you, it opens up so much more than when you're just a stagnant guy that gets thrown the ball because he's wide open. It's just such a huge difference. And I love your point about the numbers not quite bearing it out yet, because the assist numbers, you know, I kind of looked it up thinking just from the eye that maybe his assists would be up this year, and they're not, they're down. So, you know, he's had some flashier assists, but overall, they're not trending up just yet. But I do wonder, say we're podcasting in another 20 games and another, you know, 18 win streak, as you said, that will drag us back onto the microphones, that maybe the numbers overall, but particularly in some of those key indicators, will be trending up, because yeah, I think it's all there, and we just need to see it consistently, I should say. And I think, you know, us just as fans, and you and I in particular, like I said before, we're just a little bit gun shy at the moment, because we've seen this small sample stretch from DeAndre before, and then seen it trend back to, you know, him just kind of sleepwalking through games. We've said it before, he can get, you know, 15 and 12 in a game very easily and have, you know, very little to no impact on the game. But I think he's really impacting games at the moment. I love what you touched on before, because I had the question down here now. After the playoffs and some of these national TV game performances, we've seen enough from that perspective, right? Like he's a big, you know, big game player. If anything, it's the other way. It's the kind of, you know, monotonous regular season games where you might not see him show up as much. But if he's got the microphone on for TNT, or it's the playoffs, or it's a national TV game, I think we can pretty much bank on the fact that the good DeAndre is going to turn up. What do you think?
Absolutely. I'm totally sold. Dude just loves the limelight. He loves being the star.
Yep.
And I love him being the star. I hope he keeps it up. It's fantastic. I think, and all, you know, the other context we should give is that basically everyone in the league stats are down overall.
True.
The scoring is just down.
Yep.
And I think the other context point for the Suns specifically is there's just a lot of good players in this team. And when you have a deep team like this that shares the ball, you're going to have some suppression of individual stats a lot of the time. And I do think he's going to regress towards the mean in a good way. He's not going to shoot. His free throw percentage is like 61% right now. He's a better free throw shooter than that.
He does need to get a routine or something. I said this the other day, because he's a real rhythm guy, and he just seems to, step up to the free throw line with nothing in mind and just shoots the ball. And I think he has a lot of bad misses, particularly because of that. So I'd like to see him develop something there where there's just some consistency, because his touch is so pure inside the paint that he's got to be a better guy than that. And that's the funny thing about it. We're seeing him get to the line more. I think he had 11 free throws in one of the games against the Warriors. Ended up finishing 9 of them, so that's a pretty good clip. But it's the funny thing about DeAndre, and I think why we find him so fascinating. It's like there's always give and take. It's like he's getting to the line more, but all of a sudden he's shooting horribly from the line. He's playing amazing defense the first 3 years of his career, but his offense fell off a cliff. There's always, when he gives you something, something always gets taken away, and we're just waiting for him to put the whole thing together. And I do think everyone takes some sort of a hit on this team numbers wise, but as we've always said, it's not really the numbers with DeAndre. And his defense, I think, has gone up another level. Just the way he communicates.
Yep.
There's been so many blow-bys on guards this year where he just perfectly rotates to the baseline and just stops the attack. And I think that's the stuff, as you said, the blocks mean absolutely nothing. The way that he's able to defend, the different types of defenses he can throw, he's such an asset on that. And I could talk about his defense all day.
Well, yeah, and you brought up earlier the fact that their Suns were able to successfully defend the Steph Curry, Draymond Green pick and roll, which not very many teams can do that. And the large reason why they can do that is because they have a 7'1" gazelle who can somehow stay out in the perimeter with guards.
Love it.
And his arms are just. I think Zach Lowe made this point. Somebody made this point where, like, it sounds stupid, but DeAndre just has extremely long arms. So when he just realizes that and uses them and puts them in places, it's just hard to get around him and shoot around him. I mean, didn't he block a Steph Curry 3-pointer in the first game?
He sure did. It was probably one of the highlights of the game.
There are not very many guys who could do that, David.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah, he's a joy to watch. I really want to see him put it all together.
Yeah.
Maybe this is it. Maybe this is what we've pointed out so far in the pod. Booker's out. It's ready for someone to step up. The early warning signs have been there for Ayton. Maybe he takes it on himself. I would love to see it.
I would like to actually see them get him more shots.
Yep.
Honestly, why not? I mean, I feel like I'm like one of the Twitter boys who's always like, feed Ayton. With Booker out, like, why not? But not a whole lot of better options on offense at the moment. And the last thing I want to say on Ayton, I'm glad you brought him up, is just the Sam Vecini podcast from when we really just first started this. Always takes up my mind for when we just thought about how Ayton's value, how he could earn being the number 1 pick would be if he can, in this era of going small, be the kind of the mold breaker who can stay on the floor in the playoffs and be 5, who's 7'1". And obviously we saw it a little bit last year. And the more and more he goes that way, the more and more he becomes just a super valuable player for this team, particularly in the context of being with Mikal, who also is a game wrecker on defense, and then also just the fit with those two, and then with Chris Paul and Devin Booker. It's absolutely ideal.
I don't know if you saw it, but that was the podcast that I had in mind when I tweeted, I think during the first Warriors game, or just before it. I think it was during the first quarter, actually, when DeAndre was really dominant in that first quarter. It was like, we had so many discussions pre-draft and then after drafting DeAndre that were all about, is he going to be able to survive in high leverage games like the playoffs or big games like the one against the Warriors? And it was just, it's so nice having gone through that playoff run and then a couple of these Warriors games just to see, we were right on some of it, we were wrong on some of it, but it's just awesome to see it, not just be theory anymore. I think that's what I love about this current Suns team is you and I had to talk so much about theory and, what might be in the future. And the future's now. We're seeing it all play out, and he is staying on the court. He can hang defensively, and then he's able to punish teams offensively as well. He is just such a unique player from that perspective, and you're right. That's how we said he justifies being taken number 1. If he can be that cheat code type player in games like this, where the Warriors are forced to play an extra big or something because as good as Draymond is defensively, he just can't handle a guy like that when he's playing that aggressive down low.
He doesn't have the size for it. And if Ayton can force James Wiseman onto the floor in a playoff series,
gimme.
That is something that we want. Yes, that is something that we want.
Yes, give me that. Give me
All
that.
right, this is actually a pretty good transition to my question because he was part of it. And it was sort of like, I kind of want to get your take/grades, I guess, on how a few of the young guys from our team's core have played so far this season.
Okay.
So I guess let's just start with Ayton. How would you grade him? We talked about him enough. How would you ultimately land on grading how he's played so far?
Yeah, I think I'd probably give him like a B plus. I think, he's doing everything that he, was doing for us last season. I think he sacrifices so much. I think maybe I'm giving him extra brownie points for, not faltering into not getting the max contract and all of a sudden coming out and playing selfish basketball. I always give him major credit for just the role he plays. The last thing I had here is he's top 5 at the moment in screen assists and contested shots. So the role that he plays on this team is just, screen, roll, defend everything on the other end, don't take too many shots, and he does it perfectly. And as much as we'd love to see him kind of take on a little bit more to maybe get that A plus, I'm pretty happy with him so far, particularly after the knee injury and coming back.
I can feel the Utah announcers and fans just with the sweat beating down their foreheads with the screen assist stat. If Ayton never comes and takes number 1 from Gobert on that, they don't be able to talk about anything anymore.
Well, they've pivoted. Did you see the other day someone mentioned, I think it was Sam Vecini. Yeah, they've got sprint assists now, so they've pivoted away from screen assists.
They will find a way to make Rudy Gobert number 1 on something in offense every year.
Correct.
They'll find a way. But no, I agree with you entirely on Ayton. That's about where I'm at with him. I think there's room to grow, but it's hard to be upset with how he's playing. He's doing what we need him to do to be successful. Next guy, I want to ask you just to grade first without much analysis, and then I'm going to talk about it a little more because I think it's an interesting one. That's Mikal Bridges.
I'll give you my grade, and then if you're going to go with some other players first, let's save Mikal discussion for the end, because he was my second big question here before we...
Okay, so let's save him then.
Okay.
Let's do Cam Johnson then, because those are the only two that I have.
Yeah, good to see Cam turn it around a little bit, shooting from deep. Shooters don't forget how to shoot. I said that the other day, and then a few people pointed out some shooters who have forgotten how to shoot in the past, namely Markelle Fultz. A few people threw Duncan Robinson at me, but again, that just proved my point. I think Duncan will be fine longer term. Guys like that don't just fall off an absolute cliff.
Yep.
And that includes Cam Johnson. Struggled really early. He's now the leading shooter on the team at over 40%, just bumping Booker out from that top spot. So, the thing about Cam is it's really weird. He kind of disappears through long stretches. Monty doesn't play him as many minutes as you kind of expect a guy of his skill set to be able to play on this team. So I'd probably say he's really kind of like a B. He's not doing anything more, or not flashing really anything at all different. I think he's underrated in a lot of aspects of his game, but I already rated a lot of those things, so he hasn't surprised me, say, with his defense this year, which I think has been really good. A little bit of extra playmaking. One thing I will note with Cam, which I would have brought up later, but in case I don't get to, he seems to have this really great chemistry with JaVale.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see him run a little bit more kind of pick and roll with JaVale, because they just seem to have this understanding that brings out kind of the best playmaking from Cam Johnson. But yeah, he's just been solid, which is kind of just who Cam has been since he joined this team, really.
It kind of seems like everybody has good chemistry with JaVale, because JaVale just dominates second units because they're all stretch fives and stuff he's just dunking on over and over. But I agree with you. He does have good chemistry with JaVale. The thing about Cam Johnson is so interesting to me. His stats, a lot of his stats are essentially identical to last year.
Yep.
Almost across the board. But the big difference is, you pointed out the first part of it, the 3-point percentage is way up.
Yep.
From 35 to about 41, which is where you'd expect him to be. The 2-point percentage, though, is way down from 58% to 46%. And I think part of that is that he's not trying a lot more things, but he is trying to do a little more the drive-in, pull-up, 16, 15-footers, which have been abysmal for him this year.
Yep.
He's not making those. And then the other thing, too, is the free throw percentage is down from 85 to 71. Probably small sample size theater there, but still, it's not what you want. It's weird. I think, if Cam Johnson just got his other efficiencies up to where they were and kind of should be, he'd be having an outstanding season. with the way he's shooting from outside. But
Yep.
for whatever reason, he's just not scoring from 2-point. I don't know if you have any thoughts on why that might be.
I've literally just thought of something, and this is why I love doing this. You know, we said from the start, we just hit record and talk Suns, and if people listen to it, great, but I just enjoy the discussion. I've literally I thought about this in the last 10 seconds. JaVale McGee has been awesome. JaVale McGee is also a very different backup center to what the Suns have played in the last few years, namely Dario, Frank Kaminsky, you know, even Torrey Craig as a small ball 5 at the pointy end of the season. Cam Payne's shooting is down. Cam Johnson's shooting, as you've just said, from 2-point is down. Even Devin Booker, I believe, going towards the rim has been down. Pretty much everyone is down across the board. As good as JaVale has been, is he clogging things up a little bit where Cam Johnson, Cam Payne, they're not getting as many great looks at the rim as what they have in the past because the floor isn't, I wouldn't say not as space, because I think JaVale's still doing a great job, you know, as a lob threat, but it may be just, it's different. It's a different shift in the way that the floor balance looks at the moment, and the guys are struggling maybe a little bit to particularly you know, finish inside the arc. A guy like Cam Johnson, maybe he did adjust in the last 10 games, and JaVale's presence down the lane has given him even better looks from 3, and he's hitting those. But yeah, maybe they haven't quite adjusted in the second unit from playing with a guy like Dario, who is just, it's just a completely different look on the offensive end, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think it's careful, and I think you would agree with this. It's careful to point out that this might be a good thing anyway.
Yes.
You know, it might be good to have sacrifice some of that efficiency for JaVale because it's working. We just won 18 games in a row.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good point. I'd love to see a breakdown. Maybe there's something for a newsletter of sort of on-off with JaVale on versus off. All the you know, kind of these players we've been talking about percentages and how they're playing.
Yeah.
I think that'd be really interesting to analyze. Intuitively, I think that makes a lot of sense. That JaVale, while doing a great job himself, maybe impacting the way the second unit is scoring. It's just the way the NBA works is if you have Frank Kaminsky or Dario out there, especially Dario, you're just going to be a little bit better offensively because you're going to, you know, there's not a 7'1" behemoth under the basket.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's just how it works. I think it's a really good point, and it could definitely explain some of what's going on with Cam. Some of it also is probably just random variance. I don't think he's going to shoot that poorly from 2 all season. He's going to make a 15-footer at some point, I think, I hope. I still like, again, eye test is a big part of that. I still think the eye test is pretty good with him. He's hit so many threes that at the beginning of fourth quarters or in the third quarter. His trademark now is like hitting 1 or 2 threes in that critical end of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter stretch. He just does it all the time for us. I have a ton of faith in him. I think that with Booker out, I think Shamet starting makes sense, but I think closing with Cam Johnson will more often than not make sense.
Yes, that kind of big lineup in a way. It's pretty hard to guard a team like that when Cam's out there as, you know, kind of the shooting guard, essentially. And he does a good enough job on the defensive end to cover up for that. Yeah, I like, they're looking for him a little bit more in those hot stretches, I think. Too often in times gone past, Cam ended up just getting the, you know, extra rotation pass after it's gone through everyone else's hands and landed with him, whereas he's going on these little flurries now because they're running stuff for him. Chris, in particular, is running Snap, the Spain pick and roll for Cam a hell of a lot more this season than they ever have in the past, and I think that has been a huge reason that his numbers have gone up. They're definitely looking for him a lot more, which is nice to see.
Yeah, you know, I'd say after an Ayton or JaVale lob, which is the best play on our offense, the best percentage look, I'd say a wide open Cam Johnson 3 that they set up is probably right there behind it.
Probably,
I want to happen.
Or as I've been saying, a wide open catch and shoot corner 3 from Devin Booker, because he basically hits every single one of them.
That's something that we should, I don't know if you have anything on this later, but we should at least touch on the fact that it's really nice when Devin Booker makes his threes. Like, it changes the entire equation of how we look against other teams. When he's hitting the off the dribble threes or the pull up threes, it just makes it impossible to defend.
That's the big thing. If he can keep hitting those pull ups, the way they're getting him wide open looks is just incredibly, you know, offensive design, that a guy with the gravity of Devin Booker is getting this many wide open looks, which, you know, as I wrote, is leading to him being, or having the best shooting season of his career so far. But yeah, it's the pull-ups, which a lot of people have discussed in the past. If he can hit more of those, because we see, that nasty kind of right to left in transition move that he has that just gets him a left-hand layup every single time. Because he has that in the bag, if he can start hitting the pull-up too, like, he's just impossible to guard in those kind of early offense situations if he's starting to hit that at like more of a 37-38% clip rather than the 32-33 that he's shot in the past. So yeah, I'm loving that newsletter is still looking good at the moment, and I hope that it still looks good after he returns from injury as well.
Yeah, I hope it's soon. It really sucked. Bad timing for that, because he was really coming on.
Yeah.
He was playing really, really good basketball when that injury happened, so hopefully he's back soon.
For sure.
All right, let's do the Mikal thing. So the reason why I think he's actually the most interesting one on this list that I had of these three guys, because I think if you ask any Suns fan, we're giving him A's across the board, probably, right?
Yes.
But we were really excited for him to possibly take an offensive leap this season, and it just really hasn't happened. His points have been down per 36 from last season. His assists are down. His rebounding's down. Blocks are even down. Steals are a bit up. Efficiency's down. I mean, efficiency's still great. It's down, though. So he hasn't taken that offensive leap. I think he's made up for it on defense, probably. But let me ask you that. Where are you on sort of his offense? I mean, we were so excited for him maybe to be that third scorer next to Booker and Paul. But he just hasn't been there quite
Max,
yet.
here's my second question. You ready?
Yeah, ready.
Mikal Bridges, taking a leap or just more recognition?
I like that. That's very interesting.
My first two notes: 12.4 points per game down, 3.8 rebounds down, 1.8 assists down, 1.5 steals, that's up, 0.6 blocks is down, 54, 40, 85, pretty flat in terms of what he shot last season. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, they're really good shooting splits and really good numbers across the board as like your fourth option, but it's really funny that we've doubled up on that, because we always do, but also just thinking back to the last 30 minutes of conversation on some of the other guys in terms of the numbers not quite showing the impact. I think Mikal's the ultimate from this perspective, because the numbers aren't better. They were still good to begin with. He's got maybe a little bit more responsibility on both ends, but particularly defensively, they've ramped it up again. But the numbers just don't suggest right now that he's taken a leap, even though everyone probably feels like he has. They are running him a little bit more, through Booker's kind of actions, and maybe we'll see that a little bit more with Booker out the next few games. That's helping, like I pointed out in the last newsletter, that's helping a guy like Devin Booker shoot better from three. So I think Mikal definitely deserves some kind of secondary credit there, that those numbers don't go his way, but they go Booker's way. His defensive load is just ginormous. So, if he does what he does against Steph Curry but only has 2 points, sure, I'd love to see him have 15 and do that against Steph. But, just the sheer amount of work that he puts in on the defensive end as the point of attack defender. I think we saw it when Mikal went down. Not to suggest that Monty and Chris Paul don't genuinely care for Mikal Bridges, but I'm sure part of their reaction was like, fuck, we can't lose this guy. Like, he is our defense. And, I genuinely think he has Defensive Player of the Year credentials. I don't think over the course of the season, just the way that award goes, that he'll get quite in the conversation. But yeah, offensively, after a strong start, has kind of dipped again, which again is a bit of a trend of Mikal Bridges. And maybe, like we've said, the bright spot of this Booker injury is that a few of these things pick back up and these guys realize what we need them to do. He's been a little bit more aggressive, but again, like, I looked at the numbers, his drives are actually down, his shots on those drives are down, so it's like the eye test is telling me that I see him attack closeouts, particularly from the corner, so much more than I have in the past, even last season. But then you look at the numbers and it doesn't quite back that up. So I'm a little bit perplexed by that in general. In terms of the things that he's doing really well on offense, he's 95th percentile in transition. I stumbled across this the other day in the Knicks game, I think it was, when I was rewatching that. He seems to take advantage of when they switch on the defensive end, then when they get a run out, no one knows who's supposed to have Mikal Bridges, and he just gets all of these easy buckets, which I'd never noticed before, and I think is something I'm going to be watching going forward. He's actually 90th percentile as a screener in the pick and roll. He basically slips, every screen that he sets for Chris Paul, and he'll often get found going towards the bucket that way. And he's still 80th percentile on cuts, even though the league has very much wisened up to that and don't let him get in behind defenses as much as usual. But I don't know. It's a tough one. Do you have any more thoughts offensively before I delve a little bit further into the defensive side, Max?
Yeah, first of all, what I would say is that the transition thing is such a huge thing for him because teams don't treat him like he's LeBron James in transition, but he kind of is LeBron James in transition.
Yes.
And no one ever will treat him that way because he's Mikal Bridges. He doesn't score that many points. Like, what do you need to worry about? But in transition, there's really nobody better than him. He's so graceful and so long. It's just so hard to stop him. Especially when he's with Booker, because Booker knows how to push with him. I think offensively, I agree with you. The eye test I think a lot of it was early on. I think he stopped doing it, but he was definitely pushing it a little bit more offensively. I don't know. It's flummoxing. I think he hasn't taken a leap at all in offense. I think he's kind of similar in offense to what he was last year at the end of the day. Defensively, though, and I'll let you get to your stats on this, but I think that is clearly where he's taking a leap. I think even if it doesn't show up in the stats or whatever. I don't. Obviously, defense isn't about stats. Who cares? The way he can impact the game defensively now, I think we always cite the Warriors game because that was the most clear example of it. It's just different than it was last year. He wasn't this confident defensively. He wasn't this much of a terror. He was a great, solid player who, he was always in the right spot. He made some plays, but now he's more of a game wrecker than I think he was. This was stats based, but in the Nets game where he had 7 steals, I think 6 in the first half, that wasn't happening last year. He just wasn't that aggressive on defense, and he wasn't able to make that level of plays. He was unbelievable that game. You remember that little stretch where I think he broke up 2 plays. One of them he stole the ball and just went all the way for himself for a dunk. That's the kind of stuff that looks like a star playing that we weren't seeing from him last year. And it's really exciting. I think, and my guess, it probably has mostly to do with his strength. I think he's gotten stronger.
100%.
And it just allows you to stay out there, right? It just allows you to be that way all the time. You don't get taken advantage of. You don't get blown through. With him, it's very rare for him to get kind of overpowered now. I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the strength there because his body really hasn't changed. Little bit of a tease into what we'll get into in Did You Know in a second. I've been watching a lot of old clips for something, and Mikal looks exactly the same in his rookie year, but he's clearly a hell of a lot stronger. And I think that's allowing him to take some of the bigger matchups. Like you probably wouldn't have seen him take Harden as much, for instance, or do as well as he did on Harden at the other game versus the Nets. He's taking a lot of those bigger wings as well as the point of attack guys. Obviously, in today's NBA, the point of attack guys are often those bigger wings. So if you've got a guy like Mikal Bridges at your disposal, then you're doing a really good job. I think you're right. You've hit the nail on the head. All his aggression has kind of been put into the defensive side instead of the offense where we may have expected it to go. At the end of the day, if he's like a first team all defensive player of the year, type candidate, what he does on offense is totally fine. He shoots above 40% from 3. He's absolutely lethal in transition. He can cut off the ball. He's not a liability that just sits in the corner like other, specialist defensive wing types who you struggle to play in key games. So I don't want this to come across too negatively because if the leap that he's taken is defensively and he can still do all of those things offensively, you're still talking about a perfect player in today's NBA and most importantly, a perfect player for this team specifically.
Yes.
Now, if his offense took a leap, then you're talking about him, potentially being an all-star, all NBA type player. That might still be in his future, but it's definitely not a negative that, he's lent further into the defense instead of maybe where we expected it to come from on the offensive end. I'll just touch on what I teased earlier on in the episode in terms of him being an Iron Man. Everyone knows he's played 250 out of 250 games and doesn't look like changing that streak anytime soon, which is incredible in itself. He's also leading the Suns in minutes at 34.6 minutes per game. And then here's the really awesome one, Max. And it really lends into what we were talking at the start around what defense is. And it's not just getting a hand up on shots. He's currently 10th in the NBA in total distance run this season at 61.1 miles. But on the defensive end, which they track offense and defense miles specifically, he is first in the NBA in defense distance covered at 30.2 miles for the season so far. So a lot of his work, a lot of his defense is chasing guys around rather than just getting a hand up on shots. And I think that stat in particular speaks to just how valuable he is for this Suns team, Max.
Yeah, that's a fantastic stat. I absolutely love that. It perfectly encapsulates what he is. You should tweet that one out.
Yeah, I should.
That's a good one. I think overall you can't be anything but over the moon happy with Mikal Bridges. He's amazing. He's maybe probably the Suns player who has the highest approval rating, which is 100% among fans. He's just so solid. He's rock solid offensively, even though he hasn't taken the leap. Like you said, his efficiency across the board is amazing. Exactly what you want for a 3-and-D player. We were just hoping, I think, before the season started for just a little bit more than 3-and-D, which I think there's tantalizing flashes of that. We just haven't gotten that put together yet. I think it's probably still in his future. But like you said, as long as he keeps playing this way defensively and keeps up the efficiency offensively, there's really nothing to complain about.
No, I think, if he finishes out this whole rookie extension with the Suns, I think he's very much in play to be my favorite Sun of all time. Just the way he plays, not a superstar, obviously not a Nash, a Barkley, or even potentially a Devin Booker in terms of the approval rating of all fans, but just the way that, the things that I like to see basketball players do on the court, he just does it all as far as, pleasing on the eye for someone like me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I know there was a lot of hubbub over comparisons between him and Shawn Marion earlier this week, but I think it's a good comparison. He's very similar in what he does for the team and how beloved I think he'll be for it. Suns fans haven't gotten to experience a lot of good defense in our lives. A lot of good offense we've had. A lot of good offense.
Correct.
Not a lot of good defense, and I think that we really, really appreciate it when we get it because we have it now. I think Mikal Bridges will be the best defender we've ever had when it's all said and done. I don't think it's that controversial.
I just hope that Bridges isn't as negative about that role as Marion became, I guess, throughout and then post his son's career. And I don't think he will be. I think Bridges is built just a little bit differently to Marion was.
Yeah, that's the other thing about Mikal Bridges is you couldn't have a better personality either for a person.
Exactly.
He's unbelievable in every single way. Yeah. It makes sense why James Jones pushed so hard for that trade up in 2018. I'll say that. All right, I think it's time for Did You Know?
All right, Max. So much of this season and this podcast has been centered around the Suns' winning streak, and for very good reason. So did you know, after getting to 18 wins in a row, the current 21-22 Phoenix team now hold the record for the most wins in a row by any group of Suns players? Of course you knew that, Max, and I'm sure everyone listening along at home did too. Typically, when such a milestone corresponds with us recording, I'll use that to dive into all the fun, quirky history of that fact and test you with a few questions. But good news, Max. Today I am calling an audible. I figure that during that streak, you and all the listeners have likely seen on Twitter or throughout the broadcast and heard everything there is to know regarding Suns winning streaks of past, present, and maybe future. So Max, instead, I can promise you just one test question in Did You Know today, and one that absolutely no one except for me will know the answer to, so the pressure is well and truly off. And to prove it, here is that one question for you right this second. Max, how many toe-on-the-line three-pointers would you guess Devin Booker has hit throughout his 430-game NBA career?
I love the question. I don't. First of all, how did you figure this out? I want to know later. I hope that's part of this. But 430 games, you said. Just because I'm never going to guess it right, let's do a joke guess. 430 is actually one per game.
You may be a little bit older, but if I did tell you that I knew the answer, would you be at all surprised?
Yes, I think it's impossible to know that, but I believe you now that you do know that.
And he has a transition 3 or 2. It'll be a 2.
I wouldn't want to be.
As you know, my last newsletter issue was on Booker's current hot streak, shooting from 3 this season, which I hope you and the listeners have all read by now. In that, I made a reference to a joke that many in the Suns community like to go with, being that it seems Devin Booker never misses a shot when he has his foot on the three-point line. So the encore to that piece and that line is this very segment where I took on the challenge of working out not only how many Book has hit, but whether he is in fact a better shooter with his toe on the 3-point line. Do you want to know the results, Max?
I absolutely want to know the results, David.
All right, first, let's go back to his rookie season, 15-16. Booker made 11 of 24 shots when he had his front foot on the 3-point line. Not bad at 46%. Then we have the 16-17 season, by far the most frequent toe-touching season Booker has had. He shot 46 such shots and only made 16, a dismal 34.7%. However, not that far off his career average from 3, so not at all surprising. The following season in 17-18, Book had his least efficient season on the line, going 8 of 22 for 32%. 18-19 Max, things started to trend back up. Book hit 8 again, but from only 19 shots, so up to 42% for that season. 19-20 was the bubble season, so surely things went up, right? That is correct. Book had 8 again from 18 shots this time and crept up to 44.4%. Enter Chris Paul in the 2021 season and Booker smoked them with his foot on the line. 53.5% to be exact, as he went 15 of 28 for the season, which brings us to the short sample size of the current season. But Booker is hardly slowing down. He is currently 6 of 13 with his foot on the line. So back to that one answer you gave. I'm not sure if you were doing the quick math in your head as we were going, Max, but the season-to-season answer for his total amount of foot on the line threes is 72 for his career so far.
Deep 2 for D-Book.
That's right. According to my research, Devin Booker is currently 72 of 173 when he has his 1 foot on the 3-point line. That's good enough for a shooting clip of 41.6%. That's more than 6 percentage points better than Booker's overall efficiency from 3 to when he has his toe on the line. So Suns fans, you aren't totally going crazy thinking that Booker gets hot when he has his foot on the paintwork. But Max, to take you and the listeners behind the curtain a little, like you mentioned before, let me take you a little bit deeper into the numbers here and why overall they may not be that surprising. We know the 3-point line in the NBA is 23 feet 9 inches above the break and 22 feet from the hoop in the corners. So did I watch all 1,081 shot attempts of Booker's career from 20 to 24 feet range? I know I promised only one question at this segment, Max, so I'll make it rhetorical for you. The answer is yes. Did I also have to watch another 500 odd shots from what the NBA logged as 18 feet and 19 feet? Max, the answer is also yes, because the extra thing I learned during this exercise is you cannot trust the NBA's tracking data and you have to watch the tape. So while Booker's career average from 3 is 35.4%, his career average from 3 between 20 and 24 feet is actually just above 40%. So just a small win for the toe on the line 3 at 41.6%. What really supports the theory though is this: on 2-point shots within the same distance, when he doesn't have his toe on the line, Devin Booker only shoots 34%. So in summary, the answer, Suns fans, is that Devin Booker is a more efficient shooter with his foot on the line, both compared to when he shoots from within the arc and also when he is clearly outside of it. But Max, I always like to round things out with some craziness, even though this Did You Know has probably been batshit crazy enough already. So here it goes.
Booker trying to shake him. Long 2. Good for Booker.
You and the listeners may or may not have noticed that the shooting numbers the last few seasons were drastically better than those earlier in Book's career, like the 16 for 46 second season that he had. Well, there might be an even bigger reason Suns fans really believe in this theory when we look at more recent times where maybe a bit of recency bias is kicking in. If we take just the Monty Williams era of the last 2 and a bit seasons, Devin Booker is shooting 29 of 59 on threes with 1 foot on the line. That's right, if Booker takes and makes the very next very long 2 when he returns from injury, he will be shooting exactly 50% since 2019. Max, as we await Booker's return to the court, hopefully that gives everyone listening something to watch for when he returns from injury very soon. that should come in the not too distant future, as we just discussed. So it's probably time we move into talking about that future to round out the episode right now.
I know I say this all the time, but that has to be the best one you've done. I mean, I can't believe that you put that much work into it. That is unbelievable. That is definitely the selling point for this podcast. I'm going to be quote tweeting and saying, David actually figured out how efficient Booker is with his foot on the line. The number one thing we all talk about. It's amazing.
And I will be following up with video on Twitter when everyone listens to this eventually. So there is proof that my research will hold up, Max. So that was a fun but a lot lengthier task than I initially anticipated.
I bet. That's incredible. Well, just thank you. Hats off. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's a lot of work, and that's awesome. That's fun to know. Okay. I have one. Mine's pretty general, David.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to go. Maybe you should go first with yours, and I can go.
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much touched on every player, so we don't really need to backtrack over or anything from the past with the streak so far. So let's just dive straight into the future. I think this is an extension of a couple of conversations we just had, really. But the question I had is who's going to step up and be the legit sixth man for this team? So, unsurprisingly, the starters take up the top 5 spots for minutes per game. And then after that, you've got Cam Johnson, 23, Frank Kaminsky at 20, Landry at 19.5, and Cam Payne at 18.2 minutes per game. Let's leave Frank out of it for obvious reasons, the injury, and I don't think his role will be quite as extensive as what saw him get 20 minutes a game while Ayton was out. I love the balance, and I think the team loves the balance, but kind of like we spoke about before, I'd love for one of those other 3 guys to, really step up and take that role, whether it's Cam Johnson, Cam Payne, or probably my favorite, as anyone listening earlier would have worked out, is Landry Shamet. So, they're all around about the same in minutes. Cam Johnson takes 7.7 shots a game, Cam Payne takes 9.3, Landry takes 6.4. Points per game, Cam Johnson 9.3, Cam Payne 9.8, Landry behind them at 7.6. We both already touched on Cam and Landry shooting above 40% from 3. Cam Payne's down at 31.7. I'll throw it to you. Who do you like out of those 3 to kind of... I mean, maybe you alluded to it a little bit before already, but, we don't really have a legit sixth man on this team, and I think it's actually a real strength of it. But like you said before, like maybe a guy who will finish the game with the starters or be really crucial to this team down the stretch. Who are you going with?
Yeah, so it's kind of a different answer than who would finish the game with the starters, but to some extent it almost has to be Cam Payne a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he's got to get the efficiency up, and he's just going to take a lot of shots. He's kind of what they call in baseball, I think, an innings eater.
Yep.
There's some of that to him where we just need somebody who's going to keep the trains going on time, and he's kind of the guy who won't disappear. He'll at least keep shooting. But I'm with you. I mean, obviously, you're not going to get me to argue that I would like to see Landry Shamet be the guy to sort of take that over. I mean, and the thing that we touched on earlier that I think are real strengths for him are the handle and the shooting, obviously. Yeah. He is he has the skill set, I think, to do that. For him, it's a lot about confidence, whether he's going to be sort of the aggressive mentality to be able to shoot more. Like you said, I think he was the lowest shot attempts among those guys, right?
Yes, only 6.4.
And he's playing more minutes than Cam Payne, so the opportunities are there. I think that, to some extent, he's a more dependent player than Cam Payne is. Mm-hmm. But also, I think there is room for him to be more aggressive himself. I would like to see that. Cam Johnson, I think for him, it's just more a matter of just making his 2-pointers.
Yep.
It's weirdly down on that, so definitely would like to see that regress back up. But I think it's a good question to ask. I think it's something that we're going to need to have happen, particularly as we get, as you like to call it, towards the pointy end of the season. I think we're going to need more guys who can provide the scoring. I think that in large part is maybe why we lost to Milwaukee. A couple of reasons, that and backup center are why we lost to Milwaukee. And I think that very much the reason why we got JaVale McGee and Landry Shamet was that was in the mind of James Jones. Yeah. That's what happened to us. And I think that, that actually makes me want to lean even more towards Landry, because I think we kind of brought him in for that role. So, but hopefully he can fulfill it.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe I'm falling into a trap a little bit, but just the overall investment in the player and the, I guess, skill set that he brings that other people can't bring to this team and was a genuine weakness of the team in seasons past when they didn't have guys in that role. I just kind of feel like that's where it naturally goes to, and I don't want to put too much stock in that, but it does, the next 5 games will probably be more important than the last 2, but you know, he's played 31 and 26 and a half minutes in the last 2 games, which is by far the biggest gulf compared to his season average with the other 2 who both bumped up a little bit, but nowhere near as much as Landry did, which obviously makes sense when he was put in as the starter in the last couple of games. But I think that's the one for me. I think it brings the biggest new dynamic to the team, and that's why I want to see it. But I do love your point on Campaign. I think particularly harsh on him given the context that we haven't had a backup point guard of his caliber for quite some time. So what he brings as that eater up of minutes that isn't at least a negative, even if it's just a net neutral, that's actually extremely valuable when your starters are as good as what they are, that you can just have a guy eat up minutes and not hurt the team. So I think that's a good point too.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate. You mentioned him a little bit. I want to give him a shout out because I thought he was just playing so well. Frank Kaminsky was really. I think it wasn't just like a small sample size thing. I think it did seem like eye test wise that he's just a better player now than he was in the past few seasons. And it was really unfortunate to see him go out because I didn't think he was going to keep scoring 30 like he did in, I think, the Kings game or whatever it was. But he was definitely better, and I think that could have been somebody who would help with that in certain minutes. It's sort of a bummer he's out.
Yeah, while we're randomly mentioning players who haven't been mentioned so far, let's throw Jay Crowder in. Absolutely nothing to really talk about numbers-wise. He's not having a great shooting season. I think defense, he definitely ties a lot together. But the number one thing to mention about Jay Crowder this season is the floaties celebration. Like, it's just awesome. Like, I remember seeing it and kind of not being sure quite what they were doing there. And then, again, Kellen Olson did the deep dive reporting and found out that they're putting their floaties on whenever they hit a floater inside the lane, which I just love.
It's fantastic. Yeah, no, Jay's just rock solid. Yep. I think the other thing about him too, while his overall shooting numbers are not good, he can still catch fire sometimes. Yeah. Like I think late in the Warriors game, right? He hit 2 in a row. Very late in the Warriors game, that sort of gave us the win there. So
not scared to shoot like some of the other guys if they've missed some, and that's a skill for this team in itself.
Yeah, we need guys who are willing to shoot, especially when you're out there with Booker and Paul. You're gonna get looks. So I think he's been great. I'm glad you gave him a shout out because he always sort of gets the short shift. He's just kind of the guy in the background who does the dirty work, but he is very important to what the team does.
For sure.
Yep. Okay, we can move to mine.
Do it.
It's very, very general. I'm just kind of I kind of want to gauge where you are in this team, kind of versus where you were before the season started. Obviously 19-4 is a great record, 18 in a row, amazing. Mm-hmm. I had very high. I don't recall where you picked them at. I had them going 62-20 before the season started, so I was pretty high on them to begin with. I placed a sizable bet now that sports betting is legal in Arizona on the Suns to lead the league in wins. Nice. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. It's going to be them or the Warriors probably.
Yep.
So I was already pretty high. I think I might even be a little higher on them now. But I kind of see where you are on that now.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, I came into the season almost feeling like the regular season didn't matter. And then, boy, did they make that look silly because I got swept up in, the 18-game winning streak just like everyone did because, something like that, which this Suns, us as Suns fans haven't experienced since the 7 seconds or less days. It was hard not to get swept up in that. So, I came into the season being like, if we take some losses for, development and progress for the playoffs and some new things, then I'm all for that. I do think that even though they went on this streak and were doing everything to win every game, Monty still has found little ways to, add new wrinkles in, play guys in different roles. As I said, Chris is being defended a little bit differently in certain games and they're giving other guys the opportunity to step up. So I have still seen that a little bit. So I am still, I guess, more positive than when the season started in that a couple of the things that I thought they needed to improve on to hopefully go one step further. There has been flashes of that, and I'm also mindful, like we discussed before with a guy like Landry, that there's still 60 more games for him to get better at the things they're doing with him, and just that they're giving them the opportunities to do so is probably the most encouraging thing. So yeah, the record's obviously great, but I don't want to fall short again if they manage to ride the wave and get back to where they are. And I do think whilst there's maybe a couple of things with the roster in general, which we'll get to in a second, from an on-court perspective with what they've got right now, they are a better team than what they were last year, and that's really all you can ask for, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. They're definitely better. And I love the point you make, because I was with you before the season started. I was very much more about, hey, just stay healthy. Doesn't matter what seed we are, just make sure you're not in the play-in, and let's see what happens in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But my thinking on that has really changed, and I think the biggest reason for that is that I now am staring down the barrel at a potential Warriors series in the Western Conference Finals, and I think home court will matter just tremendously in that series. I think Golden State at home is just a different beast than they are in Phoenix. I think both teams are that way.
Yeah.
Because I think our home crowd now is established itself as one of the best in the league. It's one of the hardest places to play now. I think anybody would admit that around the league, and then Golden State has the avalanche factor I was talking about earlier. Like when the crowd gets behind them, and when Steph's hitting threes and the whole thing's jamming, like, you're out of the game. So I think getting a Game 7 potentially in that series at home is so much more crucial than I would have thought before.
Where's the Christmas Day game?
It's here. It's in Phoenix.
Okay, that will lend to your point exactly, I think, because their home game, I guess, wasn't kind of too realistic in terms. Well, hopefully not. With Booker and stuff out, hopefully that's not what we're going to see in the playoffs. So that was hard to kind of gauge. But yeah, I think you're right. I almost wish that it was Christmas Day there, because I think we'd really see, with a healthy team, that kind of advantage and how our team goes up against that. But yeah, not something that I've thought about a lot in the past, but I agree with you. The more we get into like who we're going to play, we're not seasoned in this, we haven't done it for 10 or so years. Last year I kind of was just happy to be there and didn't care. I was very much on the train of bring the Lakers on in the first round, and if we lose, so be it. This year, with the added pressure, I am a little bit more like, how do we get the quote-unquote easiest path that we possibly can in terms of the matchups, and then get home court against the Warriors, because it can definitely matter that the Suns were a better playoff team last season at home than they were away. Like, there's just no denying that with the advantage they got from the home crowd. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, I get what you're saying on it'd be maybe more of a test if it was in Golden State on Christmas Day. But I want to go to the game, so I disagree.
Yeah.
I want to be here.
See, I'm on the other side of the world where I don't have those same biases, but I'll be living through everyone that day, on which we've discussed on this podcast many times, Boxing Day here in Australia, which is just wall-to-wall viewing of NBA the day after Christmas here, where you are just sitting on the couch with a belly full of food and probably a hangover. So it's just the perfect day over here.
That is fantastic. I wish we had Boxing Day here. Also, it's amazing how we ended up getting the primetime 3 p.m. ABC game. Did the NBA know this was going to be the rivalry? How did they plug into this?
They absolutely nailed that. Yeah, absolutely nailed it. And we deserve it. We've missed out on Christmas Day for a long, long time. So
what a way to roar back in.
Good to be back.
All right, that's really all I've got on my end. Is there anything else you want to talk to before we step into list?
Yeah, let's just kind of very quickly on the back of that conversation, looking forward to the playoffs, because we don't know the next time that we'll record. Hopefully it'll be before the playoffs, but we'll see. Like, the locks right now in the rotation: Chris Paul, Booker, Ayton, McHale, Jay Crowder probably, and then you've got the semi-locks with the two Cams. We probably saw enough last year's playoffs where things would have to be drastically wrong between now and the playoffs where they don't have a cemented role. So that's already 7 guys. Then you've got the unknown, the guys we brought in, like you mentioned before, McGee and Shamet, and then the complete wild cards like Dario, if he come back, if Frank was able to maintain what he was doing. And we know that Monty loves to throw Abdel Nader in on the back of a 3-month knee injury into the Western Conference Finals, so we can never totally rule out that he might get thrown in. But I'm just looking, guards, they seem pretty set. They've got Book, CP3, Payne, and Shamet, so not expecting much change there. Wings, maybe they're one short compared to having Torrey Craig last year. I think it's still the bigs for me. Ayton and McGee with only, an injured Frank and Dario behind them. So I'm just interested, we don't have to talk, trades or, buyouts or anything like that. But if there was one position in, say, an 8-man playoff rotation that still needed addressing, what do you think it is?
No, I think that's probably right. I mean, everyone's been talking about Thaddeus Young so much that it's almost like a cliche at this point to talk about trading for him. But
Thaddeus old?
Yeah, Thaddeus old. I do think that is kind of the position that could most use upgrading. I really like what JaVale's done for us. I still think in the playoffs I want him more as like a break glass in case of emergency replacement for Ayton for certain foul trouble and things like that.
Ayton backup, not Suns backup, is what I've been calling it.
Yes, I think that's a really good way to put it. I think I remember you saying that with the Caius. I remember you saying that. I think it's a great way to put it. I think still that. I think still the Thaddeus Young type. I also, if the Suns make kind of a big splash in terms of acquiring somebody, I think the person who it would be somebody who's like a third scoring option. You know what I mean? Maybe like an Eric Gordon type. He makes so much money, it's hard to get him.
Yes.
But that's kind of what I have in mind is if you're trying to make a big splash, if you're going to do something crazy. Because, Thaddeus Young, to me, it's not a crazy trade. It would be kind of a margins trade. That would be good, but not crazy. That would be the big shake it up thing, would be to go grab an Eric Gordon type. Or somebody who you think, if, there's a game in the playoffs where Booker doesn't have it, or, somebody like Drew Holiday's taking Chris Paul out of it, who's that guy who can be the guy who scores for us and who can be the focal point of the offense? Because I think, I hope that Campaign or Landry Shamet or somebody can get there, but, last year in the playoffs, no one got there. So if no one internally is going to come there, that's the thing I could see being the big swing.
Yeah, and maybe that, not that I want to predict losses, but like we've been talking about, after your very good point early on in the episode, if we lose more games than we win while Booker's out, maybe that is the shot in the arm that James Jones and Monty need in terms of, we are still one offensive kind of option short if things change or if we get bogged down in our offense with Book and Chris Paul. So I like that call. And I think maybe even without losses, I think James Jones has shown over his short tenure so far is he does see the game what I would class in the right way. And even if we have 4 ugly wins and grind it out, he is more prone to kind of be like, that we're probably not going to get that lucky in the playoffs and we need to make a change even though it would seem like all things are rosy on the back of, an 18-game win streak. Because as much as we've tried to keep it positive, when you are aiming for a title, this isn't the 7 Seconds a Lot Less podcast that was just hoping to win 35 games one season, Max. We now are looking through the lens of winning a title, not just, making up the numbers. And there could be a hard move to make there where, even a fan favorite kind of goes out the other way just to change things up. Because as we've noted, any opportunity we have been on the mics to talk about it is, the clock is running out on this version of the Suns team. I think the outlook post Chris Paul is still really good with the 3, maybe 4 young guys that they have and their development. But as far as finals teams go, it really depends on Chris right now, and they may choose to go all in, which would be interesting to see.
Yeah, this is going to be their best chance to win a title, probably of the decade. I mean, it's possible that things go crazy, we get somebody else, and things change. But this is, I would say, I think right now, I think the Suns probably have maybe the best chance to win. I mean, it's them, Warriors, and Bucks.
Yep.
Maybe Nets if they get their stuff together in the Nets. But we're one of the favorites here right now, and I think if James Jones sees any opportunity to improve, even if it requires sacrificing some future capital, I think he'll take it. He knows he can smell it. He's a champion for a reason, right?
I'm with you on that.
Cool. All right, I'm ready for 7 seconds or less if you are.
Let's do it. We're right around our usual mark, so let's round this one out.
Let's do it. So we're both going to ask each other 3 questions for which the other hasn't prepared, has 7 seconds to answer. I will start, David. We're obviously very high on this team. Of all the concerns we touched on today, what is the most concerning to you?
We didn't really touch on it, and I'm going to touch wood while I say this. I just feel like the last couple of seasons we've been really lucky on the injury front, and I think that there's a couple of thin spots at kind of ball handler, initiator, and big that the wrong injury could really derail things here. So, I'm just crossing my fingers that health is the number one priority. Going through the stats this morning, I was kind of happy at the fact that, and I guess this speaks to the balance of the team, minutes have been, down across the board on most of our key players. And as far as things that you can control outside of, just bad luck, like Mikal Bridges, dislocated finger, you can't plan for that. You can't do anything for that. I think they're doing the right thing by, protecting guys as much as possible, and long may that continue.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think injuries, you got to be concerned. Again, with Chris Paul, he's older.
Yep.
Guys, he's older. But I'm glad you brought up Booker being hurt again, because I want to make this point very, very clearly, because I don't know that I did earlier. It's so stark, the difference between the offense when he's there and when he's not. Like, it's more than his production, his points, stuff like that. Like, the offense just isn't the same juice. Like, you see guys kind of look around like, how are we going to score a little more? When Booker's out there, it's just not the same thing. It's free-flowing.
Totally agree.
All right.
If you had to pick one guy who won't be on this team come the playoffs, whether it's a trade or just an outright waiving, who would you pick?
Oh, man, that is an interesting one. It's too cheap to go like somebody like Nader because they're too periphery. I try to go a little higher. I mean, is Dario also a trick just because he could be using a salary trade?
I think that's a good answer because I think they would prefer to hold on to him because he seems to be really valued in that locker room. But when you look at the balance sheet of the salary cap, he's kind of the first name your eyes are always drawn to, and they may have to make a tough decision like we just spoke about. James Jones wouldn't be afraid to do that, even though they'd probably prefer to keep him around. So, yeah, I think that's the obvious one.
Well, and the point we made is like this is the season, right? This is their best chance to win, and he's very likely not going to help at all this season. So moving him would make sense. Okay, what have you most enjoyed about the Suns so far this season? It's something specific. Like obviously, everyone enjoyed the 18-game win streak. Can't say that. It's like something specific about the Suns.
This is going to be a bit of a double up on my answer to Nikias, if anyone did listen to that. But and one thing I didn't mention that I had down, we just spoke about Chris Paul's age, 36 max, and he leads the NBA in assists 10.1, potential assists 19, assist points created 25.5, and assist to pass percentage at 17.5. He leads the NBA in all four of those stats, and that leads to my answer, which Chris Paul just managing the end of the game and spamming the same play over and over again. I know I've highlighted it a lot on Twitter. It wouldn't be a shock to most people who follow along with that stuff that's my answer. I'm just finding myself like laughing at the end of games. Like I haven't enjoyed watching the Suns this much in a long, long time. Like probably not even the playoffs because, the playoffs comes with that added, stressful part that sucks the enjoyment out a little bit until you actually win and can then, sit back and maybe watch the replay knowing that you've won, and it's far more enjoyable. But this regular season, that's the one for me. Just seeing him like dissect and run the same play and make teams try and stop it over and over again. I'm just having so much fun watching Chris Paul at the moment.
That's such a good one. I'm glad you brought him up because we criminally did not mention him enough in this podcast.
Yes.
He's been the best player on the team this season probably, and we didn't even talk about him. I could not agree more. When he just goes in for that mid-ranger, like falling to the side, I expect him to go in every single time. I never think it's not going to go in. He's just amazing.
All right, how many All-Stars will the Suns have this season, Max?
That's a good one. I think, watching that Booker injury closely, because that could ruin his candidacy. I think as long as he gets back soon enough, I think he and Chris Paul now are locks. Coaches are not going to lose those guys off, especially if the Suns keep playing this well. Like if we're a top 1 or 2 seed with the Warriors, I don't know how you don't have both
I
those
think,
guys on
comparing it to last year where Booker was he an injury replacement again? He hasn't actually had a legitimate one yet, has he? Not to downplay.
He has not.
But
He's been an injury replacement twice. He probably should have been on the team both times, but he's been.
I think the streak and the record is people aren't going to care about the numbers as much.
Yep.
They're just going to go. The Suns are just otherworldly at the moment, and the 2 best guys need to be on the team.
Well, the other thing too is some of the West guards are down this year. Luka's down, Damian Lillard's down. I think there's a couple other guys who are not. Even Donovan Mitchell's a little bit down. So that'll help their candidacies as well. I mean, as long as Booker gets back in the next couple of weeks, I think he'll. Also, last year the problem too was it was condensed. So they did the voting way earlier than they ever had it before. And remember, Booker had a bad start. So there will be more of a sample size here for him to...
Can we not also, I know there's been a lot of complaining about national media attention to the Suns, but, attention national media, can we not do silly things like go the other way, like say things like Mikal Bridges should get an all-star spot this year? Like, I love Mikal Bridges, but... Like, come on, you don't need to make up things to give the Suns attention. There's enough, like, legitimate things to talk about. I think that it's maybe a bit silly.
Yeah, it's fun. It's been weird seeing the way the Suns have been
So
treated.
weird.
For a while, it was like, yeah, I think they weren't getting covered up. Even like Zach Lowe had a whole podcast about it with Mike Schwartz. That was funny. But then I think this last week they got discussed a ton with them and the Warriors. So I think it's evening out there. All right, my last question for you: revised season wins prediction, David. How many wins do you think they were going to win before the season, and how many do you think they're going to win now?
I've got it for you, Max, because we've done it again. Last question. I thought this might happen. I listened back to our episode. I think I said 55, you said 58, and then that was early on in the off-season, so you probably revised thinking about it a little bit more, not on the spot.
Yeah, it was for Zona's
So
thing.
you said you went to 62, is that right? Yeah.
I did,
So
yeah.
we're on pace for 68. I don't think that's going to last, but I'm definitely going to up from my 55. I think we could win 60. I think that's legitimately within reach right now. But maybe it's me hoping that they rest and keep guys fresh and take a couple of schedule losses along the way. But I'll go 60, which is 5 more wins, which is still a pretty decent jump from my original prediction.
Yeah, there'd be nothing wrong with winning that many games. I'd be just fine with that. I would have probably upped it pretty crazily to like 64 or 65 if it weren't for the fact that Booker's hurt right now. And that made me nervous. I mean, 'cause the thing is, their pedal is to the metal right now. They are not wrestling. Like Chris Paul is playing a lot. In fact, there are times when he's in the game way too late. Monty, come on. Like
he's actually the one guy whose minutes have gone up, which I was kind of like, God, like, come on. Yeah. He's the one guy you need to be managing a little bit better.
We need him good in the pointy end of the season, David. We need him good. I'm still gonna up it though. I mean, they went 19-4 to start the season. You said they're on pace for 68. I'm gonna say 63. I think they'll break the franchise record. This team's just so solid across the board. Also, I saw a stat the other day. They have like the second easiest schedule remaining, or something like that. So, I guess there's a lot of wins to grab from that. So, they're also a lot in the bag already.
To see them do that for the sheer fact of, I reckon you and I were probably the first people last year to have the balls and the guts to say that maybe this is the best Suns team ever. We had that legitimate discussion. I don't think many others did. And then this season, breaking the streak, having a chance to potentially break the franchise record for wins, I guess so far matching the best the franchise has done in getting to the finals. I'm starting to see that creep into the conversation a little bit more, and maybe for selfish reasons and us discussing that last year, I'd love to see them break the record because I legitimately think, at least from teams that I've watched, that it is the best Suns team that I've ever seen.
I mean, I actually don't really think it's arguable. I mean, okay, of course it's arguable, but defensively they're so much better than any team that I've watched.
Exactly.
So much better. And they have these two guards who are just unbelievable at the end of games. Like, it's just a perfect combination. It's a perfect fit for a team. It's really a joy, David. Maybe we should end it there just with how amazing this is, how wonderful it is, how blessed we are to have this team after such a long period of awfulness. It's really nice,
is.
David.
And I would just add to that by thanking everyone for supporting us when we do jump back into these. It's really the only reason that we're doing it, guys. It's two things. This team is super fun to talk about, and on occasion, you and I, Max, either together or independently, will hear from people that they always love to hear from us when we possibly can. So, thanks to everyone who's listening. We only do this really because it's fun to talk about this team, and there seems to be plenty of people that still want to listen to us when we can. So, I would just extend the thanks to everyone listening, Max, and to you.
Yeah, could not agree more. Thank you. Thanks for all the content. Thank you for figuring out how many freaking us have on the line 2-pointers Booker's had. That is just incredible. That's content right there, folks. And you're getting that for free. For that, subscribe to David's newsletter or something. Do that for him. Yes. Thanks, Dave. That was fun.